Hey, it is SharePoint Dev Weekly episode 60. It is, I have no idea what day it is. I need to actually double check.
18th of November.
I know that it's Monday. 18th of, yes, 18th of November. It is Monday, 18th. It is a 1 week after Ignite, 2 weeks to go for ESPC. So European collaboration. Well, what is it nowadays? European Azure Office 365 conference, right?
Yes. Yes, it's European Conference for Office 365 and Azure.
Yes, and SharePoint. Because it is in the name. Now, and actually, now
yes.
we're already recording. I need to do this. European SharePoint Conference. And it is www.sharepointeurope.com, and it is called European SharePoint Office 365 and Azure Conference.
There you go. No SharePoint.
Yes, 2 weeks
on that bombshell. Goodbye.
Exactly. And that was all for episode 60. So thank you for joining. Oh, and we need to remember to do the podcasting things and everything else. So SharePoint Dev Weekly, episode 60. My name is Vesa Juvonen. I am a principal program manager in Microsoft OneDrive SharePoint Dev Platform team. And you are, who are you?
My name is Waldek Mastykarz. I am head of product at Rencore.
Oh, that's your title. Okay.
Yes, it's been like that for weeks now or months. So
I know.
You should go back to episode 30.
Fair point. Apparently, by the way, European SharePoint Office 365 Azure Conference is telling us it's 14 days and 9 hours before it starts. It starts on, yes, it's on Tuesday. Now I get it. So, yes, one more day. I need to figure out what we're going to do in the keynote, which we have on Thursday, related on Microsoft 365 development experiences. So.
Also, the one thing that I know for sure is that you won't be wearing any shoes anymore again. And the last time you did that on stage, there were the drummers who used to play with drums and water, and the floor was soaked. So you were walking on wet socks for an hour.
Yeah, that was so. And Jeff Deeper was on the front of the row because he had his keynote just before, and so he moved on the front of the row. Those 2,000 people in the room, and I walked in and completely soaked socks. So
and you were like, "Oh, what did I do?"
Yeah, exactly. I was really like, what?
I never did that again before.
But that was weird because obviously there's 2,000 people in the room and you can't actually look like you can't walk away. It's like, what are you going to do? Show must go on. Taking the socks away as well. That could have been an option. Now, that would have been really weird. Welcome, everybody. Give me a second. Exactly. Anyway, this time in European SharePoint Conference, now that we started talking about that one, there's actually quite a nice set of keynotes and sessions. So there's actually 4 keynotes. And I need to check this out. No, I want to have the full agenda because I think this was actually better. Last time we had a Jeff Deeper keynote on the first day, and then immediately followed up the dev keynote, and that was slightly weird. It grew to be really long, so it's actually better that it's now in the one keynote in a day rather than multiple ones. But Monday is the pre-day, so Jeff Deeper has a keynote on Tuesday. And then there's a keynote from Winning with Azure with Theas Dixit, Director Azure Business Group Microsoft, right after the Jeff Deeper's keynote, which is really interesting as well. So there's a 1 hour 10 minutes and 1 hour 5 minutes. Interesting. On the keynotes. No. Okay. I'm just trying to figure out the timings in here. But that's good, and they're not competing. And it's actually good to have a Azure Microsoft 365 in the same conference. I think this will be quite nice setup. And let me refresh the page because now this time this doesn't now feel that it's going really good. Just we restart.
Yes.
No. So what have you been up to as I wait for the screen to load on my screen?
So over the past week, we've done a number of things, right? So on the community side, we released new version of the Office 365 CLI. Yep. We have yet again extended support in Yammer. Because apparently there is so it's, or I think it's already 3rd or 4th week in a row that we are introducing Yammer commands, and we are expanding that. in CLI, and we also contemplate some other things that we could introduce as opposed to more commands. Like, what are other things that we could help people to simplify working with CLI? So there are a few ideas that we have, which we yet are to validate whether they are even attainable. But yeah, so there are a few things on our mind, and then at Rencore we are full steam ahead with experiments, trying to learn more about problems or challenges that people have in Microsoft 365 and how we could help them. And it's interesting because we use this approach where we try to come up with as low fidelity possible mockups or prototypes as we can, and that means that, well, we're not developing first. We are thinking more through what are the ideas that we have, what would work, and then we validate that with the customers, which is a really great thing. And it's surprising how much you learn, but it also puts in perspective like how long it takes to find out what you actually need to build, right? Because like oftentimes people think like, well, building stuff, that's actually the hard part, right? Because we have to think about your architecture stack and how do you support scalability and this and that. But then actually, to be honest, in grand scheme of things, building is the easy part.
Sure.
Because there are so many things before and so many things after that you have to take into account, and building is just a small part of the game, right? So once you expand your view beyond the tech you're working with, especially if you're dev, to the whole thing end to end, from ideation to adoption and support, well, development is just like a little speck in between. You build things, you go away, and then you have them before, and then there are some other things to be done, right? So this is very
and the key question always is that is what you're building actually, does it provide value or not? And that's
should you build it?
Exactly. Should you build it in the first place, or should you use, even in there's multiple dimension on discussion, but is there a matching out of the box capability? Is there something free? Is there a competitor, or is there a partner or a product which is providing the capabilities? Is it worthwhile? What is the return of investment? What is the maintenance, operations, all of that stuff? What's the quality objective of what you're building, which is an interesting discussion as well. So,
and also, so the first thing, right? Like, what is it that you're aiming to do? Because once you start asking yourself that, you'll have a better idea, like, what do we really need? Like, if you look honestly, if you want to achieve that, like, imagine that you're tasked with facilitating collaboration on projects.
Yep.
Well, like, if you look honestly, and especially if you look at particular company or even a team, well, maybe it's enough for them to have email and files. I don't know. Maybe it's enough for them to have a room in which they gather every day. Maybe that is enough, right? So once you look at the problem per se, like, you can come up with so many more ideas that go beyond tech and even beyond just the things that you know, right? So it's an interesting approach.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, if you're a developer, though, you might not care about this one. You'll just wait for somebody to make all of those decisions, and then
you have a hammer and everything is a nail.
Yeah. But it's I think that is a fine choice as well. It's not like everybody has to be a head of product. What was your title?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So you're the head of a product. That's
head of product is commonly used.
I know.
You're a principal, right? You should be working at school.
That's true. That is true.
Anyway.
Any more insults? Any good ones?
Okay, so sea cucumber comes to no.
Cucumber went to blueberry. The other one couldn't.
Yeah. Yes, but it is a valid point, right? Like, not everybody has to do everything, and there is room for devs. Like, we need to have devs, because at the end of the day, where decision is being made that something should be built, you need people to actually be able to do it. You need developers, you need architects, you need solution architects, you need project managers. So yes, exactly, right? So there is need for all of that, but Many things should not start with dev.
Yeah, true. Absolutely. We really need to make sure that wherever we are, say, for example, in the level of marketing and Microsoft, we need to figure out where are we investing and what are we hunting for. So what is the things what we are aiming to achieve out of the investments, which would be resources and developers. So it's always an interesting discussion, and then massive backlog and prioritization of things, and there's so many interests and so many alternative viewpoints. So it's an interesting discussion. Let's put it this way. But you talked about the experiences. Experiments. What do I mean experiments? We talked about this one slightly before we started recording. That seems to be a theme of this is how you make business nowadays. So which is we learn how to do experiments, right?
Well, so experiments to us means anything we come up with is a theory. Because at the end of the day, I am not building intranets. I am not managing SharePoint environment in production, right? So any idea or anything that I might have heard is just a theory, and we aim to take it as that. So we aim to take, okay, so we think that, and then we're trying to find, okay, what is the shortest way for us to prove it or disprove it? So we basically approach everything as an experiment, where up front we say, this is a theory that we have. We want to find a way to test that. So we think a way to verify this is this, like this is the most efficient way to do it. And we will have an outcome after we have reached so many people, had so many calls, got so many clicks. I don't know, like you think of applicable a metric. And then we basically run the experiment, and then at the end we can objectively tell, removing our own bias and opinions out of the equation, saying, okay, our theory either proved right or wrong. And it's no longer about our opinions.
And before you execute the experiments, making sure that what are the metrics and what are you actually calculating, making sure that you have the right telemetry in place, so you understand that you're getting the usage metrics out of it as well. So, and that's, by the way, something which we do quite heavily in Microsoft as well. So we're adding functionalities and assumptions, and then we take the metrics, and then we try to take conclusions out of it. So was it true? But that relates on the OKR definitions as well, objectives and key results. And kind of. All of the experiments will have the key results and objectives, and then you measure, is it actually getting there? And if it does, then it has a different conclusions, and it all relates on the which is, well, how would I put this? A lot of this stuff is almost like common sense. But
when you think about it, yes, but it's far from reality that everybody does that effectively.
True, that is true as well. That's true.
And also,
right?
Well, yes and no, right? Because like just the other week we've experienced, right? So one of the ideas that we have and we currently test is a set of things that we want to show, and to build all of that. Like even if that was a rough MVP, it would take roughly 3 weeks, 4 weeks. I drew a wireframe for that in hours. Already something that you can click through, you can see interaction. Roughly, you get an idea what it is about, the value it would offer. And already with that, like if the experiment, right, because when you think of an experiment, there are different kind of things you want to prove, right? If you want to prove a value prop, like you don't need to build anything. You can have, I can draw you something on a napkin, talk to you, and you either get it or not. And then sure, it can be still like, maybe it's my pitch. But if it's my pitch, then building anything will not add anything to it. Right. And then so depending what kind of things you want to prove, what is your theory, like you can go all the way from a drawing on a napkin to a live thing that you have actually built, a product that you've built.
Sure.
Right. But the art is then to pick the right thing for the right test. And be really honest with yourself, especially if you want to do this experiment quickly. What is the least amount of work that I need to do to be able to prove or disprove a theory that I have?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and also even defining what proves and what disapproves the theory can be actually
exactly.
So
Exactly.
how do we verify that it's not true or it is true, and how do we read the conclusions out of it? So interesting discussion of things. Now, actually just moving on things. I want to get back on the ESPC because now that the page is loading properly.
Now that the page is loaded, we can keep continuing.
Exactly. Now, that's an interesting discussion, which does quite a few times. But from the sake of schedule and timing, I just want to make sure that we don't again chit-chat on too much on things. I think there's a lot of kind of thinking points behind of that one as well, and hopefully actually interested in anybody who's listening or watching, what are their thoughts related on experiments and their learnings behind of that. If we could get some traction and discussions on social media or somewhere else related on these things. Now, coming back on the European SharePoint Office 365 Azure Conference. It is a role. There's a keynote with Jeff Deeper on Tuesday. Then there's a immediately after keynote with Tejas Dixit, director from Azure Business Group. And then on Tuesday still on afternoon at 4:45, there's a keynote from Scott Hanselman, JavaScript, the cloud, and the rise of the new virtual machine.
Nice.
The cloud and the rise of the new virtual machine. Interesting. And then on Wednesday, there's a keynote from Alex Simmons, who is Corporate Vice President of Program Manager in Microsoft Identity Division, so Identity, Azure AD, and all of that stuff, Azure IAM, Future and Best Practices. And then on Thursday, there's a keynote on building engaging solution with SharePoint and Microsoft 365 developer platform. And that's me and friends, so to say. So I'm just being lazy, so I can actually use other people to do the demos. Not just kidding.
No, but I mean, isn't it always like that when you rise to a certain level, like you do a keynote, you are not allowed to do a demo by yourself? Or
sure.
Allowed maybe is a big word, but I mean, that's a thing you see a lot, right? That people invite over to.
And I think one of the reasons for that is actually that having a keynote where we have used multiple people to do the demos, it has more variation, and it has kind of it's more interactive. It's rather than having somebody do a
dynamic, engaging.
monologue. Yeah, it's more engaging. Absolutely. So from that perspective, that's the thinking behind of that one. So to be fair, I think in the Jeff Deeper's keynote in the Ignite, he did 24 demos, but all of them were actually videos. So he didn't really do 24 demos, but still. So, well, I think he was pretty open on that one during the keynote. That's fine. Now let's actually do some articles, and then let's get back on the discussion on the discussion as well. I'm going to close that one. Getting it here. I'm going to share my screen. You need to tell me that you can see the screen.
I can see the screen.
Excellent. Now, let's start with the SharePoint Saturdays. So there's two different SharePoint Saturdays, SharePoint Saturday Lisbon, and I know that the Lisbon guy actually recorded a promo with Jeff Deeper earlier this year. And there's quite a big list of, again, speakers in Lisbon and familiar faces from Europe side of the house, definitely. A lot of familiar faces here as well. So a lot of MVPs and other people. Then there's the SharePoint Saturday Toronto as well on upcoming Saturday on November 23rd. And in the speaker list, I think we have a almost similar sized, actually even slightly larger than the SharePoint Saturday Lisbon. So a lot of familiar faces here as well who are active or in the community and MVPs and all of that. So really cool to see that we have many of these events in every single week, which is amazing. So it's really, really great. So last weekend we had 3 different SharePoint Saturdays, so it's just every single week there's at least one, which is pretty cool. Now,
Nice.
a few articles from the Microsoft side of the house. In Ignite, we announced the Microsoft 365 Certified Developer Associate certification, and this is something which we are still kind of evolving from a training material perspective, that the certification is already in beta stage. So you can actually already go to and take the test in dedicated test centers. I think it's in a beta stage. It was already available in Ignite as well, and it's a combination of quite a few things. This is almost like how would I put it in transparent way. It's one of those really hard certificates because Microsoft 365 developer certificate, what falls on the Microsoft 365?
Well, everything. Yeah, exactly.
Plus the fact that somebody might say that, well, why don't you have a dedicated certificate for every single application? And sure, yes, we might be heading there as well. We'll start with a associate certification, and then you pick 2 of the specified specialist certificates, and then you get to be a whatever certified pro developer in Microsoft 365, whatever. We needed to start with something, and to get the certificate track in this side also moving. So now there's the developer associate certification. There was a long list of, let's say, discussions, what we're going to actually have and how are we going to balance things out for the first certificate, which is around, is identity a big thing or is it not? Is craft big thing or is it not? Of course it is. How much we'll talk about SharePoint, what about Teams, what about Office, and all of that stuff. So it's kind of it was a really interesting discussion, and the main areas where this certificate actually concentrates is the craft and Microsoft Identity, and then the other areas are slightly not as detailed as the craft and identity.
Well, I mean, it makes sense, right? Because whatever you want to build, you first need to authenticate, and that is identity. Without that, you cannot do anything. Sure. So identity is key.
True, absolutely. Identity is the key of everything. But that's now available in preview. More details around that one AKMS Microsoft M365 Dev training. And there will be more training material available as well on that one. It's just again a resourcing and timing challenge of getting all that stuff out, but it's more stuff is coming. Now, this one was around replication of the app registration experience and application registration portal, so the apps.dev.microsoft.com. In the past, we used to have quite a few different ways of registering your apps, and you could go through that route or that route or that route and that route, and now we're kind of consolidating this to be more aligned. So the apps.dev.microsoft.com is now going to be shut down, and there is a new updated portals and guidance on how to make these things happen. So important to know as well. Now, few things related on the PnP side of the house, the open source community side of the house. So the PnP SPFX generator 1.10.1 has been released. So there's a improved DevOps integration from Vincent. That's Vincent's. Yes, it is. Vincent's.
Very nice.
And Stefan is the person who's kind of coordinating the work on this side. It is obviously in GitHub, and the documentation and the updates are being mentioned in the documentation as well. So really cool stuff. Now, the other thing on the open source side of the house, so mapping on-premises accounts to online accounts when transforming SharePoint pages is now possible with November 2019 release of page transformation. Sounds like, okay, so not quite sure what this means. But what it means is that you can use SharePoint page transformation, transforming from SharePoint 2010, 2013, 2016, 2019 to cloud. So you're able to actually have a source side, which is a publishing side in on-prem, and then you do a live translation to communication side in SharePoint Online. And as part of the translation, you might need to translate the identities as well. So identity mapping is different because and as in the Active Directory in on-premises, the identity is different than in the cloud. So now the automated open source tooling has this mapping support. So you're able to map the identity which was used in on-prem to the identity which is used in cloud. And that's pretty cool. And that is coming from Paul Pollack. And we did do a demo on this one actually on the last community call as well. There will be a separate video coming out on that one later this week. Now, then there's the user preferences in your SPFX solution. This one was interesting from Yannick. This is really around how do we store the status of the web part and the selection or the let's say user-specific information and what the user has selected. And he's using a local storage for that one. So storing the selected set of attributes to there. Now, it has some pros and cons. So easy to use, persistent data privacy is good. But then con is that local storage has only stored the internal browser data. So if you actually assign and access the page using a different browser or you refresh the cache, the information is gone. What would be alternative locations of storing data?
That's actually an interesting thing, right? Because like you can do it in a list, but then everybody can access the list. So you'd have to list with isolated permissions. And I guess that there was approach a while back. I'm not sure of the latest state that, and also not sure if that's only isolated to add-ins, but there was a way to have an specific carved out piece of storage in your My site for apps.
True. For apps, yes. You could potentially actually do that or use that option already still, because you could be able to access the OneDrive and then dynamically create a list over there to the root of the OneDrive of the user, and then store information. And definitely an option. You could also use absolutely user profile properties for sharing the information as well.
And then and then make it available only to yourself.
Yes, exactly. Because now that's one of the, how would I put it? One of the really core capabilities in SharePoint, super valuable, is the user profile application service, because you can actually create user-specific custom properties. You can store information. You can get the information really easily. Now we haven't actually given that much love for the user profile service application for a while, and there will be new directions and things happening on that side sooner or later, but it is really useful thing to be able to store user specific information behind of the scenes to the user. Now
there is just one thing, right?
Yeah, sorry.
You cannot pre-provision the property.
Correct. So the problem with the user profile property is that if you would use a custom profile properties to store the information, you would have to create the custom profile property manually in the tenant. There's no APIs to create that, and that's just wrong. Absolutely.
It's odd, right?
Yeah, it's odd. It's been like that for a long time, and right now we're not planning to invest there because we're looking into few different alternative options where we're heading from this moment forward. Sooner or later, definitely there will be ways of storing this using APIs in the profile level. So whatever that means in practice. More details on that later.
Oh yeah, I mean, it would be interesting. Like, it almost makes no-brainer to have it stored in AAD, but especially in a cloud, right?
That's
because if you think about the in a cloud,
that's true as well. Because that's how it should be. The identity is the person is the identity, and you should be able to extend the user profile. You could already today actually extend the user object in the Azure AD with a custom schema, craft schema, right? You would be able to then have additional properties for it.
Yeah, I think so.
That would be a custom solution. It wouldn't be a natively supported kind of. It would be your extension to the user profile object in Azure AD. So it's slightly different than having a native kind of a storage easily available. But again, debatable.
Yes.
Now, moving on articles. So this one is from Sergey, and he's always updating this, what has happened in the online REST API, so the native updates, and he actually has the SharePoint REST API metadata explorer, which is basically exploring some of the objects and operations which are behind of the scenes of the REST API. Now, what's kind of an interesting on this one, just to remind everybody on this one, the fact that it's in Sergey's blog and it's a service doesn't mean that it's actually supported. So some methods and APIs which we're exposing there, if it's not exposed into official documentation, it means that it's not actually officially supported. And you can use it, but there's a risk that would change the signature, which can have implications for your code. But basically, this article is listing all of the different changes and different functionalities or modifications which have happened since the August-October timeframe. This one is from Jarvas. So extracting a site collection using SharePoint site design. So we do have get SPO site script from web commandlet, which can be then used to extract the definition of the, let's say, configurations in the web level. And what it then does is that it actually extracts a site design which has to then have the script layout or action-based definition of the differences and configurations within the list. Now, what though important here to realize, what would be the difference between the PnP PowerShell and this one is that this one is a text-based export. So it doesn't actually save images or assets or documents or items. So it doesn't really have the full dependence tree. It only exports the configuration. So it does export, for example, include the branding elements, but it doesn't actually export the image. So it's not really as complete solution yet as in the PnP PowerShell side of the house, where you can actually extract full site collections even if you want as a template.
But if you need something that is available out of the box, then this is it.
Yes, absolutely. This is out of the box available, and there is a REST APIs for some of this as well. So really cool. Now, this one is from Chris Kent, extending a list of sites you can embed from SharePoint using PowerShell. The whole point being on this one. So embedding content from this website isn't allowed, but your admin can change the setting. Is the message if you're trying to embed something from a location where the URL isn't allowed to be, or it isn't whitelisted as a supported way of embedding. And Chris is basically just showing that there is a property in the site object where you can actually then modify the setting. So custom script saves domains.create. And there we go. Now the puppy is happy and ready to go, right?
Yes.
And then last piece is from Paula. So let's actually mute that one so I don't hear that much background noise. But the whole point of this one is there. So this is a set of episodes actually. So it's building an automated provisioning solution. So step by step kind of a building. What would it mean that we have an SPFX request form, Power Automate flow. Microsoft Flow has been renamed as Power Automate, but there's still flows which you create inside of them. And that's then the basically creating or the orchestrating the things, then it calls an Azure function, then that applies provisioning templates. And he's basically now starting that episode journey with this one.
So does that mean that the way it works here is that there's a form on a page, that form calls the flow calls the function? Is that the process?
Yes. Or you have a request form, you'll add an item to a SharePoint list for the request with the status of requesting, and then that fires the automate flow, and then the automate flow is the one which is calling Azure function, and then
yeah. And that's an interesting thing, right? Because in the past it just used to work, and nowadays with the latest licensing change around Microsoft Power Automate in this October, calling HTTP or issuing HTTP calls from inside of Flow means you have to have a premium license for Power Automate.
True, that's true.
So yeah,
everything what you design in cloud or in on-premises also always have a license in the implication. So it comes down on the discussion which we had actually before the article. So you need to think through. It's not just about implementing and developing that, but understanding the implication of the chosen path and evaluating different options, making educated decisions.
Yes.
On the implications of the chosen path. So definitely. Good. That was all articles today. That's it for the article side of the house. What are you going to do this week?
More experiments, more CLI. That basically wraps it up.
Yeah.
I think by itself it's already quite a lot. So
yeah. I'm doing 2 actually Microsoft 365 Developer Bootcamp keynotes. I have one in Helsinki tomorrow, and then a virtual one to Montreal actually on Wednesday.
Nice.
Probably going to use the same material just to save some time. And then I started working yesterday already on the SharePoint Starter Kit V2. So there's actually quite a few MVPs who kind of volunteered on working on that one. But before you can actually start working with a larger group of people, you need to make sure that the work has been split to a certain section, so you're able to assign them and all of that. So what I did yesterday already, it is actually already in a GitHub, is that I created all of the new solutions and structures because we want to make sure that the Starter Kit web parts can be individually deployed as well.
Very nice.
And activating every single feature and every single web part in a tenant, because that freaked out people because some of the people just downloaded the SPPKG file, put it into production, and then suddenly there was
Like,
12, 15, 16 new additional web parts.
But imagine with that, the added value of 365, right? You can have anything, including the weather and a clock. Like you don't miss anything anymore.
Now there is out of the box, there's weather and a clock, so we're not going to make
there
those.
You go.
And
yes.
Now that's actually one debatable thing because we're going to release also a SharePoint 2019 version of the starter kit. So
for on-prem,
those web parts which don't have to be the latest, they're going to be in a 1.4 level so that they will work on the SharePoint 2019. But now there's an interesting discussion related on, okay, so do we want to then have this weather web part available for on-premises or not?
Why not?
Have this? That's a fair point. And the world clock as well. So maybe we should actually make sure that those are available for SharePoint 2019 because out of the box in 2019, there is no weather web part and the world clock web part.
So does that mean that we have to introduce in CLI the ability to downgrade your SPFX project?
That's an interesting question. No, I don't think so. So the weather web part, as an example, is quite simple one, and also the world clock one. So they don't. You can implement those actually with SharePoint Framework 1.1. So it wouldn't have to be a really new version on things. So,
well, I think at the end of the day, like you can build anything with anything. It just amounts to like how much work you have to put into that, and what are the specific things that we might have used in code. Because the current starter kit is what 1.8.1.
I think it's 1.8.1. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. So what are the specific things that we might have used from 1.8.1 that we need to remove in order to port it back to 1.4? So.
Sure. And most likely in many of the web parts, in those which are now targeted to be targeted for on-prem, we didn't use anything specific for 1.8.1. We just upgraded everything to the same level. But there's a growing demand for people who are doing hybrids and that they would like to have some web parts and experiences for SharePoint 2019 as well. Also, we need to make sure that the designs which we're releasing, the templates, we have a separate one. 20 SharePoint Online and SharePoint 2019 because the modern pages have evolved so much in SharePoint Online compared to SharePoint.
So that'll be an interesting thing, right? Because like one way to do it is like if you look at that for everybody in a cloud, you want to be okay. So what are the things that aren't available out of the box that we can add to increase the value add there? But for everybody on premises, you could say, well, why not port some of the things that are available first party in a cloud to things on-prem through to basically to increase the value add through that, to make it to close the gap between what is on-prem and what is available in the cloud.
That is a fair comment and fair points, and maybe we could do something like that.
We accept PRs.
Yes, we do accept PRs. And to be fair, that's why the weather web part and the world clock web part from the classic SharePoint Starter Kit is going to be still included now that we're having this discussion for on-premises deployment of that. But obviously, it doesn't make any sense to deploy those to SharePoint Online version of the Starter Kit.
No.
So, but that's really the reason why we're now rebuilding I'm building the basic architecture, and then there's Eric Overfield and Boo Cameron, and there's multiple other people who volunteered on helping on making that V2 then reality. So
how are you going, if I may ask, how are you going to track work and keep track of everything, basically do things like CI, CD and all that, right? Are you going to do it on Azure DevOps, GitHub? You have
GitHub. So most likely GitHub.
On that.
Directly in GitHub, because there's no point. Why would we use DevOps? Because there's nothing we should be hiding in these things. So,
no, but I mean there is in Azure DevOps you can have a public repo on DevOps.
Sure, but what's the added value comparing to the GitHub?
CI/CD. I mean you can do GitHub actions nowadays.
Yep. Yes, I can.
But
again, so making things as simple as possible. But to be fair, I think that that's one of the reasons why I now worked yesterday like 4 hours. My kid was actually running in an internal park with his friends, so I was working on other stuff. And the whole point was to split the massive solution to smaller pieces, and now individual web parts and extensions can be then assigned for one MVP to actually work on, so that then they can actually make that happen, and that's it. So that's basically the making sure that we start eating the elephant one piece at a time, so to say. So
yeah,
whatever that means.
Yes, yeah.
There
I
is a
understand
saying.
point.
There is a saying for it. Yeah. Boiling
Yeah.
dough. Anyway, but that's what I've done, and that's I'm going to do some work on that one as well during this week, and then getting closer and closer to the ESPC. That's the next big one, and then luckily, finally after that, it's going to be slowing down. So, the European SharePoint conference is the week after the Thanksgiving, which also means there won't be that many US-based people probably present. Well, who knows? From Redmond, we have quite a lot of people joining, actually. I think Omar Sahim said it. We talked about it when I was Redmond, and he make sure that his family doesn't feel bad because he's actually flying the family with him to Paris for Thanksgiving, and then they go to Prague for the conference. So
Nice.
one way of handling the situation. So.
Absolutely.
But anyway, I think that's it for the episode 60. For next week, we're looking into having a visitor, and we're scheduling that for the following weeks again, visitors on these. So we'll have some new people and new faces on the SharePoint Dev Weekly.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. But thank you everybody for watching, listening, however you are consuming this media, and please give us feedback, give us ideas if there's somebody who you would like to see in these discussions or
topics you would like us to talk about.
Topics we would like to talk about. So please ping us, let us know in social media. There's multiple different ways of connecting either one of us. So
Dear Vesa.
Yes. It was this close that I didn't actually register that domain at some point.
Twitter handle. You should have a Twitter handle, Dear Vesa. At Dear Vesa. I'm gonna do it.
Okay, fine. Thank you. But thanks everybody. We'll be back within a week. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.